Welcome to the Movement Upgraded podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jen Hostler, licensed physical therapist and certified strength and mobility coach. Here you can expect to hear about all things movement. The Movement Upgraded podcast is a blend of the science of strength training, rehab, and mobility, mixed with the personal and professional experience to provide you with the steps you need to keep your body pain-free and moving well, so you can do what you love forever. Hello, welcome back to the podcast. We are going to talk about 3 tips to manage a pain flare-up. So this is not medical advice. This is what I typically go through with clients and patients that I'm working with when they're having a flare-up of a pain or injury that they have had before, right? This is something that they know they've had checked out. They're very aware of this injury, and they pretty much they kind of know like what's going on, but they're in the middle of a flare-up, right? And so it's very common for us to kind of freak out and panic when we experience pain, especially if it's a high severity of pain. But very often I'll tell my patients or clients that if they are able to reproduce, if it happened during movement and movement can make it worse, they can reproduce the pain or make it worse with movement, it's likely a movement related problem, and that's really important to understand. So flare-ups are super duper common. When I work with people, we sometimes think that the rehab process is like, okay, one day I'm just going to wake up and the pain's going to be gone and it's done, right? Like we have that understanding, whether or not it's like an expectation we're aware of or not, it's often there, which is why I created the 3 misconceptions about rehab and the rehab process, I believe. So if you want to learn a little bit more about that, I would highly recommend that podcast because I think I dive into some of that. But rehab is not linear. You're not going to just all of a sudden your pain's going to be gone. A lot of progress looks like your episodes or flare-ups, because a lot of people are like, well, I have pain, it comes and goes, it gets worse, sometimes it's better, right? Like that chronic injury cycle that I've talked about in the last episode is very common for people to experience. And so a lot of the times when I work with people, we talk about their symptoms and what they're able to do, and we measure progress based off of, are your symptoms less severe? Are they like less intense, right? So maybe you're in a max amount of pain all the time, or a moderate amount, but it's less, it doesn't go up that high as often, right? Or maybe you are not in pain every day, but you do have episodes of pain and they start to become less often. Or maybe when you do have an episode of pain, you recover faster from it. That is very much progress. Or maybe your pain hasn't changed, but you're able to do more, or you have a better awareness of your body, or you're stronger, right? Those are all good things. That means that you are making progress, and that's what we need to measure, because pain is affected by so many other things. And sometimes it takes a while for the pain to adjust, but our body can make improvements functionally much quicker. And that's why we always talk about that. So the old advice back in the day when we would go through a pain flare-up is very, very much, let's just rest and ice and elevate and compress and take some NSAIDs, right? But we know we have some updated acronyms for that, and that's not really what's recommended. So I feel like the old advice was very much just like rest, do nothing, right? Which is not really beneficial. We actually still want to do things. So I'm going to talk about that when we talk about the 3 things that 3 tips that I normally give my clients. But the other thing I want to talk about is the other end of the spectrum, which is social media now has swung so far on the opposite side, saying that we need to, here are 13 different exercises for low back pain. Do you have a sciatica coming? Here's like 12 different exercises. Save this routine for when you get a kink in your neck again. It's like we are so obsessed with fixing pain. We are obsessed with trying to get out of pain as quick as possible. I fell down that rabbit hole in the very beginning of PT school, I believe, and even a little bit right in the very beginning of being a clinician. I thought my goal was to get people out of pain as fast as possible, right? So I would chase all of these ways to get rid of pain. I'm not saying now that I try to keep people in pain. That's definitely not. I still would love to get people out of pain fast, but I'm not focusing our time and energy, which is very precious, in our sessions with trying to make them feel better right then and there. Like I don't always do that, because I kept finding that it was very difficult and hit or miss whether or not I could make somebody feel better. And I didn't feel like they learned anything or I would learn anything at the end of a session, compared to if we really spent time understanding their lifestyle, unpacking all of the things that are contributing, and really coaching and teaching them how to address their deficits, then understood that it was a long-term process. And I really got on a good, basically I kind of started to treat our situation as more of a coach who's helping somebody through this situation, rather than a healthcare provider trying to find the perfect pill or exercise to fix their problem. Then I started to realize that people started getting better, and people got better results, right? So I think really we are in social media creating more issues with this. We live in Amazon Prime, right? Like we live in Amazon Prime lifestyle in society, where we just like want 2-day shipping. You should be able to ship me a new body and I can feel better. Like it doesn't work that way. And anything worth pursuing is difficult, and anything worth working on, we should look at like a year of progress rather than like 2 days or one session of somebody trying to fix you, quote unquote, right? So when I work with people, something I've noticed is this tendency, and I think it's again because of social media, this tendency to try to get out of pain fast. And I think that's twofold. One, because of social media, but two, I think we're really averse to experiencing discomfort. We have a lot of unhealthy coping mechanisms because we're not comfortable with sitting in discomfort. We don't like experiencing discomfort, and we have lots of form of escapism to distract ourselves from discomfort. And I think that something that's really beneficial is just understanding and experiencing discomfort. This is not to gaslight you and saying that your pain is something you just have to suck it up and deal with, right? I'm not saying that. I can see how people might take it that way. So I'm gonna like try not to leave that impression. I just don't want us to be so obsessed with trying to seek relief so much that we lose track of all of the other things that we can do, and making sure that we're adjusting things for a long-term solution. That's really what it comes down to, right? Short-term versus long-term. Sometimes when the pain is so significant, you have to do what you can to just feel better. I get it. We've got a society that doesn't have any allowance for sick days. People go to the hospital and they're still working and doing their job. It's absolutely asinine. So I totally understand that, like, sometimes we have to feel better, and that's totally fine. Do that. But also, we want to understand that in the long term, we want to address the things that are contributing to why those symptoms are coming up in the first place, right? We don't always know exactly why. Things are complicated. It takes some understanding, but we want to look at the short term, and we want to understand the long term. We really want to make sure that we are doing things appropriately. So I want us to think less of how do I get out of pain right now, and more, how do I adjust my lifestyle and or habits, and how do I look at the big dial movers that are going to help me feel better in my body and set me up for success in the long term. So yeah, this is a long haul mentality that we have to have, but that's what it comes down to, because pain is just as much a function of our health as our health, like is our like blood lab values or our just fitness levels, right? Like they're all a function of a contributor, a representation of what our health status is, to an extent, right? There's nuance there, but I'm not going to go super deep into that. So nonetheless, we don't need to fear pain. Like, I don't want us to be super afraid of it. I do want you to, if you have pain that's coming and happening, it's very, very helpful to get addressed by a provider, right? You want to find somebody who can tell you if this is something you should be concerned about or not. I already gave my advice that I normally give my clients on whether or not it's something that they should be concerned about to a point where they should seek out somebody, or if it's not, and the movement thing is really the biggest thing. So with that whole 10-minute soapbox about this, let's move into the actual 3 tips for managing a flare-up, right? So number 1 is going to surprise you maybe not if you've been around for some time. But that is going to be, you need to manage your thought spirals. So we need to understand that when we are in pain, there is a lot of our mental health really does affect pain. And there is a whole mental aspect to experiencing pain and dealing with it. If you've been in pain, you'll know this. If you've been in chronic pain, you'll know this. It is exhausting. It's taxing. It's like having a cloud over you that is constantly pulling you into thinking about pain. But when you have a flare up, it is very easy to get into this negative mindset where you're just thinking worst case scenario. We think absolute fear. The problem with this is that fear and going into those types of states actually perpetuate pain and put us at a risk factor for that becoming something that's more chronic rather than just something that is intermediate and goes away and kind of heals itself, right? So if we are experiencing pain, it's really important to kind of manage those thought spirals. That's what I call them, thought spirals. Like, we don't want to go down those like worst case scenarios. They're not helpful. I don't want you to judge yourself for doing that, again, because that it happens. Like, that is, I am pretty sure it is like the normal human way of coping with things. It's just the way our brains are. But I want you to know that like we've got to find some way to adjust those. For some people, that might mean going to therapy. It might mean seeking out a little bit extra support from their friends, from family members. It might mean finding a healthcare provider who can support them. I've said this in the past. A lot of people think that they need accountability when it comes to like rehab and doing mobility work and things like that. I think they really just need support. So if you are somebody who's like, I need support, I need reinforcement, I need reassurance, that is what a healthcare provider or physical therapist can do for you. Like that is a very big part of what we do. I swear the amount of time that I spend with my clients and my patients where I am just reassuring them and we are conversing about those things is pretty significant. It's a lot more than I ever thought it would be. But sometimes that is one of the most important things, right? So manage those negative thought spirals. Number 2, this is going to surprise people. Actually, probably not. If you're listening to this podcast, you're probably expecting this. But number 2 is actually move as much as you can. When I work with people, there's a lot of that old mindset of rest, right? Like, I'm just going to do nothing. And we want to do nothing. We don't want to do anything because it's painful. And sometimes there are times when it's so painful that like, yeah, we shouldn't be doing a lot. Like literally you just probably need to go to bed, like do what you can to manage the pain and figure it out and just get some rest and let time pass by, right? But most often the ultimate goal is going to be, what can I do? And I tell people cars are always my first option. Movement is always going to be better. It downregulates things. It gets blood flow moving to the area and it decreases some of that inflammation if we are having too much of it. Inflammation, remember, is really beneficial if we have an acute injury. It starts the healing process. Cars can help facilitate that healing process. We just need to make sure they're not painful. So find a way to do cars that's not painful. Like there's a lot of modifications. Literally just doing them small movements, even if it feels like it's the tiniest movement, it's a great sign of progress as you're healing in a new injury is, okay, well, I was only able to do this much when I was first in pain and now it's getting better. Like you'll see that, and that's a lot of motivation and positive reinforcement, which can actually decrease how much pain you're experiencing just because you're seeing progress, and that's pretty cool. So move where you can. General exercise also gets blood flow moving. So if you have a neck issue, but your legs are okay, going for a walk might be a very good idea. Getting your blood flow going, getting a little sweat, even a lift, if you can do it, if you can find a way to lift around your pain or injury, is also beneficial. Your body will tell you if it's too much very often, right? So if you're going through the movement and it's getting worse or it's just like constant as you're doing it, maybe we don't want to do something, right? Like we don't want to do that. So if you're sitting there and you're like, I'm not in pain right now, but anytime I try to move, it feels painful. Try to find movements that are not painful. But if you're doing the movement, if you're doing a lift, like if you have like a neck flare up or something where you can't turn your head, very often a lift in the blood flow and that ability to move actually gets things to relax a little bit, so the pain declines and you get a little more range of motion back. So it's not a bad thing to see if you can do something, right? Like I reinforce movement. I don't reinforce rest. Moving as much as you can, right? So that doesn't mean we need to find 3,000 different exercises to fix our problem. In fact, I think that kind of can become more problematic. just see if you can do what you already do, what you're already working on, or cars. Like, keep it simple. So that's number 2. Try to get moving. It'll decrease pain sensitivity for sure. And it will also facilitate the healing process. If we have a lot of inflammation in there, you want to communicate to your fibroblasts to lay healthy collagen down when we're laying new tissue down. That is what the inflammation process does in a nutshell. And if it doesn't get information, which is through forces and movement, then it will lay down not as healthy collagen, which is scar tissue, and it's kind of more mangled, and that scar tissue is more prone to injuries and pain down the road. So we want to give it information. So we want to move where we can and as much as we can. The third thing is going to be down-regulate your nervous system. We want to make sure that you are trying to chill out, right? So we want to down-regulate, which just means bring yourself into a sense of calm. This kind of goes hand in hand with that managing your thought spirals, but we definitely want to promote a sense of safety. I've talked about this a lot in previous episodes, but managing pain really has to do with managing a sense of safety and threat in the brain. If we feel very threatened, if we're very upregulated and stressed and afraid, then we are going to experience more pain. But if we are more calm, if we can bring a sense of calm, if we are in that parasympathetic state, that rest, digest, repair, and recover state, then we are definitely going to have less pain in general. We're going to experience less pain, and we're going to be able to tolerate things better. So that down regulating will decrease your pain threshold. So there's a little bit of research that shows that mindfulness, meditation, breath work can decrease pain sensitivity pretty quickly. So that can be something. Pain in and of itself, by the way, is upregulating. It's stressful to go through it. So that stress cycle can also promote more pain. So you're in pain, you're stressed about the fact that you're in pain, stress makes you feel more pain, and there we go in that cycle. This breaks the cycle and kind of down regulates you. I typically have my clients do breath work, like real calm, either laying on their stomach or back, just breathing very slow. If we can be mindful of our breath, feel our breath, close our mouth, breathe through our nose, breathe into our belly, and slow into our sides and back. We want all the way around movement. If we can slow that down, especially slow down the exhale, we will bring ourselves into more of a parasympathetic state. It's one of the simplest, easiest ways to promote more parasympathetic activity. Mindfulness is really great. So if you find yourself just like constantly frustrated and not paying attention to what you're doing, just a little bit of mindfulness throughout the day so we're not rushing around is really important. And meditation can be really helpful. So whatever that looks like for you, there's a lot of different forms of meditation, but those are different options, but those are how we kind of bring ourselves into the present state and down-regulate our nervous system. Basically, just like do things that bring you calm, make you feel peaceful. Be around people who are peaceful, right? If you can. Find some social support. That actually does really help down-regulate you if they're the right type of social support. You know, there are people who do not do that, do the opposite. So don't go around people who are not very calming, or people who might spike your anxiety, stress, or upregulate you. Something like going outside, being in nature is really down-regulating and can have a calming effect. So things like that are going to be the things that you want to do. Like, what can you do to bring a sense of safety to your nervous system? And you might not know that yet. It's something that everybody kind of has to learn, and people will start to have their go-tos. But this is kind of what I typically tell my clients when they're going through a pain flare-up. We want to make sure that we are managing those thought spirals. We want to make sure that we're moving when and where we can. Some of my clients, when they're going through something really stressful and they have a pain flare up, they actually will just kind of like abandon movement for a little while and just kind of like walk or do whatever it is that they can. And it's not a ton. And they'll focus on managing their thought spirals and down regulating their nervous system until they feel a little bit better. And that's totally okay too. Because like I said, pain is stressful. And so if you have that pain that's stressing you out and then you're trying to move and it doesn't feel very good, sometimes that's more stressful than just letting it be and knowing that it'll go away eventually, and letting time do its thing and just managing your thought spirals and down regulating. But those are going to be the 3 things. the 3 tips that I typically give my clients when they're going through a pain flare up. The last thing I'm going to say is that it's really helpful to understand why it's happening in the first place. The last episode that I just did talked about 4 reasons that your pain can come back. So that's definitely something to kind of check out. And I think I already mentioned this, but again, if it's something that's like just really concerning you or you're not sure about it, it can be really helpful just to see a physical therapist so they can tell you, they can screen that for you and give you the reassurance that you need or that you're looking for to help calm your nervous system. So sometimes that is a form of self-care that we need to do when we're going through pain. And I recommend it. I recommend finding and getting a physical therapist in your life that can do that for you. I know that some of the people, I know that personally, because I am a physical therapist, I am somebody who has dealt with and continues to deal with chronic pain flare-ups very often. They are so much better now that I understand the stuff that I share with people. But if I had not understood this stuff and didn't know this information, I don't know where I would be today, but I likely would have a handful of medical diagnoses and probably not be doing well. I really don't think I would be. So it's really helpful if you can have somebody that you build a relationship with that you can go back to when you need. I know that my family members and siblings, and even sometimes Ryan has said, it's just really helpful to have a clinician that you know that can help you know when something is worth being worried about a little bit. And if you grew up in a family, or even not in a family, but around even one parent who tended to treat health-related things like very scary. So like if you fell when you were a kid and your parent kind of was like, oh my gosh, very like jumpy and anxious, that usually promotes a sense of fear around pain and injuries for you. And that conditioning is probably still there subconsciously. And it's something to pay attention to. It might be something to unpack in therapy, but it's at least something you can unpack and start to kind of consider yourself and realize kind of what your thought spirals are happening when you're going through pain and things like that. So again, that's why a professional or a physical therapist can be really helpful, just because they can help you get that reassurance, right? Like, I can't tell you how helpful that can be for people unless you've experienced it yourself. If any of my clients or patients are listening to this, I'm sure they're nodding their heads because it can be frightening and frustrating going through stuff on your own. So having that social support or having that support from a professional can be very, very helpful. So with that being said, those are my 3 tips. I hope they're helpful. If they were, let me know. If you want to send me a big light bulb idea that you had, that's totally cool. I love hearing from you. If you haven't already hit that 5-star review, do that for me. I much appreciate it. If you already have, thank you. I am going to leave you at that, and we'll chat in the next episode.